Hi guys. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about some of the stories I've heard in foster care and adoption, and we are in my beloved homeschool room, so you get to see a little bit of my life there. I homeschool two kids, have an 18-month-old, hence the baby gate right there. So you get to see some of my space. But what I want to talk to you about is, I guess, more of why I pray for these foster kids. And I was at the call 7707 in Nashville, Tennessee, with Lou Engle and gang, and that was actually, I didn't really know who Lou Engle was. I was part of a house of prayer, the Prayer Room, if you have heard of it or want to look it up, TPR. They're in Dallas, Fort Worth, between them actually, in Arlington. I think they're still in Arlington. And I had never heard of Mike Bickle or Lou Engle or any of these names, and so they were all going to the call, and they were going to pray and fast for an entire day with tens of thousands of other people. You know what? Let me back that up. I think it was tens of thousands. It was 70,000 that were in the stadium that day, I'm pretty sure. So it was riveting to me. First of all, fasting was hard, and it was hot because it was in July, the 7th month. It was, 95 degrees. They kept saying, everybody drink water, even if you're fasting, drink water. And we did. And we prayed for a lot of things that day, but one thing that they prayed for was the spirit of adoption. And when that happened, something clicked in my heart. It was an arrow into my soul. And I didn't know what they were presenting. They kind of kept it behind the scenes. They were telling a story about this unwanted child that was left on a doorstep of another group of young adults who held prayer meetings together and had a little house of prayer. And they took turns caring for this child for a while. And they found a couple, or the couple found them, who wanted to adopt the child. And it was a really, really sweet story. I was thinking about it, and I was listening to all these other stories you're telling me. It was amazing because we had been praying for the ending of abortion. I had done that. I was familiar with that, but I was not familiar with the spirit of adoption. It was really the opposite of the spirit of murder, right? Or the spirit of rejection, or the spirit of abandonment. And so that changed my life, really. I remember crying. I think I dropped to my knees. I was on a tarp because they had laid a tarp across the turf. We were on the ground there in the stadium, and lots of people in the seats, obviously. So that was kind of the beginning of, what is this thing in my heart? What is it to me? And I started researching, and I started writing down notes. In fact, I thought of how cool it would be to write a book about it, and I just lightly wrote down some ideas for chapters and tucked it away and went back to college in the fall. And I actually did writing a book and publishing it. It's called Sons and Daughters. I think I said that a time or two ago. Sons and Daughters, This Generation and the Spirit of Adoption. I learned a lot. I got to read some studies on foster care kids, what happens to them, what are some of their experiences, what are the problems. But I just hate the idea that there are children who were not cared for in their home, so either rejected, abused, or abandoned, neglected, one of those or a combination of those, and then they come to a home in foster care where they have more bad parents. So it's really important for Christians to get involved in foster care itself. And then if they lose their biological parents permanently, how can they just sit there and no one wants them? That's really detrimental to my heart, to their hearts. How do they view the world at that point? Nobody wants them. It's fend for yourself. Anyways, there's so much you can go into that, right? You can go into that orphan heart. What does an orphan believe? How do they live? What are their lenses? What does that look like? It's completely the opposite of someone who understands and knows perfect acceptance. I was at a conference in Dallas many years later, actually at my home church, Trinity Church. Shout out. Even though I don't support the system of church, I do support the people that are there. They do a beautiful, beautiful job with loving Jesus and loving people. So in that conference, they had a speaker speak on foster care, and I believe the lady she was either a volunteer in the local foster care system for Dallas, or she was actually a paid worker. And so she came on stage and she was talking about how important it is to be a foster parent, how important it is to take care of kids, and if you're interested in adopting, please come talk to her. And she told us that just the night before this conference, in the office of CPS in Texas, that's Child Protective Services, because they did not have enough homes for these kids to go to, they had 27 children sleeping on the cold, hard floor of an office. And that just made me sick. It made me ill. I couldn't stand the thought of that. And you go from one point of rejection to another point of, it's like the government's supposed to be coming in and rescuing these kids, and then they throw them on the floor. And I know that's not the government's, it's not the individual's fault who are in that position, right? We need more people helping. But we also don't want the government to be the parent of these kids. So I think really what spurred me to do this recently was I was driving in South Atlanta, very south, and I'm not in Atlanta at all. And I saw a little sign at a, what do you call it? Light. Yes, a green light, red light, a four-way stop. And I was about to turn right, and they have these, little plastic signs stuck in the roads. They do that for politicians and whatnot. And it was an advertisement for a foster care organization, I guess. And they said, foster parents needed. And I was just like, ugh. And immediately I thought of those 27 kids years ago who were sleeping on the floor in Dallas of an office because there was no home and no bed. And somewhere down the line, some people said, no, thank you, I don't want to be a foster parent. And so I think a lot of where the problem remains is, why are these kids who don't have biological parents anymore sitting in the system for a year, 2 years, 5 years, 12 years, exiting out of the system? If those kids were adopted, then I believe we'd have plenty of foster parents for these additional children who need to be in for 6 months and go back home because their parents passed the test, or a year and get to go back home. So there's my heart. I don't want these kids to feel that way. And there's a lot of ways that I wanted to get involved. I wrote the book, but at this point I realized if I go in and I rescue one child, I'm going to be sick to my stomach at the other 27. Then I'm going to be sick to my stomach at the other 100, one state over, or at the other 2,000, 2 states over. And that's something where I made a realization. I had a realization. The Lord gave me the realization that this was a burden that I need to continually pour into. And so what did it end up being? This is intercession. And so I'll continue this journey on. We'll pray for the next child or a sibling group tomorrow. But I wanted you guys to know where I'm coming from. I wanted you to know little tidbits of the reality of this situation. And I believe God is going to raise up these kids specifically for something very special because they've been forgotten, because they've been rejected and abandoned. I think that He has a special future for them, and I think we need to take special care of them and special note of them. I want them to be saved so that they can fulfill the full destiny that God has for them. Anyways, you guys have an awesome afternoon. Talk to you tomorrow.